Hello everyone, this is Ola. In this video, we'll discuss the metabolism of the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscle contractions require the presence of energy, and we derive that from ATP. So we have some free ATP in a very small amounts that is enough to do contraction for about 5 seconds. That's it. After that, we need to look for sources of ATP. The first source is creatine phosphate. Then there is anaerobic glycolysis, then aerobic respiration. So let's do the creatine phosphate. So here we have the creatine phosphate that we have in our muscles. And this will split into creatine and a phosphate will be separated from that. This phosphate combined with the adenosine diphosphate so that we have ATP that is used for energy for skeletal muscles contraction. However, this provides energy for about 15 seconds only, and then we need to look for another source of ATP, which is the anaerobic glycolysis. So here we have the glycogen that is stored form of glucose in our skeletal muscles, or the glucose in the blood. This is splitted through the glycolysis process in the cytoplasm to become to produce two molecules of pyruvic acid. So each glucose molecule provides two pyruvate. And as a result, from this process, we will gain two ATP molecules. So two ATP are gained from one glucose molecule during the anaerobic glycolysis process that happens in the cytoplasm of the cell. Of course, here oxygen is not needed. This is only enough to do muscle contractions for about a minute. However, this provides ATP in a fast way. So it works to provide ATP quickly until the kind of slower aerobic process begins in the mitochondria of the cells. Okay, so the pyruvic acid resulting from the glycolysis process has two fates. In the presence of oxygen, the pyruvic acid enters the mitochondria for the aerobic respiration. If there is no oxygen, it is going to be converted into lactic acid that diffuses to the blood. Suppose you are at the beginning of your exercise and you have oxygen. Then the pyruvic acid enters inside the mitochondria. Also, fatty acids and amino acids can be used for that aerobic respiration process. Inside the mitochondria, the pyruvate is going to be going to some enzymatic activities like the Krebs cycle. And as a result of that, CO2 and water will be resulting. Of course, CO2 is going to be exhaled and you will get 36 ATP from this aerobic respiration. So how many glucose molecules how many ATP molecules we can gain from one glucose molecule? It's 2 from the anaerobic step and 36 from the aerobic step. So we have a total of 38 ATP molecules from one glucose. The aerobic process can continue for hours. So you can walk for hours because of that aerobic respiration. So in summary, we have first the creatine phosphate that provide ATP for about 10 seconds. Then you go to the glycolysis that happens in the cytoplasm, and this provides ATP for about 1 minute on average. Then you go to the aerobic respiration, and this can continue for hours. However, you are continuing to do exercise until you ran out of oxygen. What would you do? You will shift again to the anaerobic glycolysis. But here, the pyruvate that results from the glycolysis will not enter the mitochondria because there are no oxygen. So this will be changed into lactic acid that diffuses into the blood. At this point of time, you will start to get tired quickly. We call the point of time at which the aerobic respiration it changes to anaerobic again, the anaerobic threshold. What is oxygen debt? When you do exercise, oxygen is withdrawn from its reserves in the hemoglobin that is found in the blood, and it carries oxygen, and myoglobin. Myoglobins are the molecules inside our skeletal muscles that store oxygen. This oxygen is going to be used for the aerobic respiration. But after your exercise, you really need to restore this oxygen back because you have to pay your debt. So here you are using oxygen and you have a debt that you need to pay back. This oxygen is required to metabolize the lactic acid, to restore the creatine phosphate, and to reoxygenate the myoglobin molecules. How do we pay this debt back? By increasing the respiratory rate, increasing the heart rate. All of that will drive oxygen quickly so we can pay our oxygen debt. It's like you are taking some money from your credit card, so you have a debt, then you work so that you earn the money and pay it back. Muscle fatigue is the inability of muscles to contract forcibly after prolonged activity. So if you do exercise for a long time until you run out of oxygen and then you shift again to the anaerobic glycolysis, at the end, your muscles will fail to produce more movement. Why is that? Because here you have a decreased release of calcium, and the calcium is really required for the contraction to happen. The creatine phosphate, oxygen, glycogen, and other nutrients resources are now depleted. You need to restore them. Also, the internal acidity within the muscle from the lactic acid accumulation contribute to the muscle fatigue, as well as inhibition of the cross bridge. So how to avoid that? You must give your muscles a time to rest, restore the oxygen, get the pH to the normal, and then you restart your exercise or workout again. Okay, let's go with some review questions. And first here, what are the sources of ATP? First, we have the creatine phosphate, and this is enough only for about 10 seconds. Then you shift to the glycolysis that happens in the cell cytoplasm, and this is enough for about a minute. So here you use glycogen to produce 2 pyruvate and 2 ATP. Then in the presence of oxygen, you will go to the aerobic respiration. And here you can use, in addition to glycogen, in addition to the pyruvate, you can use fat. You can use triglyceride and protein. So the aerobic exercise is able to utilize fat. But the anaerobic exercise utilizes only carb, glycogen only. What acid increases during strong muscular activity? Of course, it is lactic acid because the pyruvate now will not enter the mitochondria due to lack of oxygen. They will change to become lactic acid that diffuse to the blood. The fibers that are the smallest in diameter are used in longer duration, lower intensity activities. Are what kind of fibers? They are the slow oxidative ones. They have a lot of mitochondria. What is the pathway which produces the largest amount of ATP? Remember that in the glycolysis, we have only 2 ATP from one glucose molecules, but in the aerobic process, we have 36 from one glucose molecule. What do we call the amount of additional oxygen that must be inhaled following exercise to restore pre-exercise conditions? This is oxygen debt. The metabolic pathway, which only uses glycogen, which only uses glucose, which only uses carb, so it does not use fat, is the anaerobic